Hi, everybody. We had our second round of Zoom meetings today. They're always optional because things are so crazy. I can't expect you to be able to log in at a specific time always. We have to be flexible about all of this. I know that you didn't sign up for a distance learning class, and quite honestly, I thought I'd gotten out of teaching distance learning classes about 10 years ago, but it's kind of fun getting back into it. But I've learned a lot about Zoom. My 2:30 class today had a really good session, and I was delighted at the idea of being able to share it with you, only to realize I had forgotten to record it. So I wanted to kind of recap some of the valuable information that we talked about during that class session. I'm getting a lot of questions about the annotated bibliography. And annotated bibliography is a research concept. It's a way of gathering your source material, making sure that you have the citation and the complete publishing information, and then writing a summary, an annotation, a summary of the information that's in that article so that you can keep track of interesting information that you find over the literature, and so that you can keep track of which piece of information came from which source. So there are some samples online, but basically the pattern for annotated bibliography is citation, annotation, or summary. Citation, annotation, citation, annotation. So I want you to do one annotated bibliography entry, which means you go to the database, you find one source, you pull the citation, and you write the annotation. And there's a file in Module 5 in Canvas. Actually, there are two files. One of them is called Library Off-Campus Access, and the other one is called Formatting Citations. And so those two presentations are supposed to take you step by step through the process of writing an annotated bibliography entry. So I'm asking that you do one of them. That's your first annotated bibliography entry, so that I can check your form. And then I'm going to ask you for the second annotated bibliography assignment to do two more for a total of 3. And some people have asked me, can we use more sources? Sure, absolutely. If you were really working on an advanced degree and you were writing your thesis over a comparison of Hemingway's Hills Like White Elephants and Cat in the Rain, you would conceivably want to read every article you could find, every article that has been written about the stories. If you're really invested in a research project, that's what you do. But for a freshman paper, we just want to show you the steps in a basic form. So 3 articles about a topic is not much. It's really just a drop in the bucket. But it's enough for what we're doing. Some students had questions today about how do you use the information from the annotated bibliography in the final paper. Is there a relation? Is there a connection between the two? And the answer is yes, absolutely. When you write those annotations or summaries of the different articles, you could very well be writing paragraphs that actually move into your final essay. That's why it's very important to paraphrase, not to use direct quotations, because you don't want to lose track of which words originally came from a critic and which words originally came from you. So it's a really good habit not to quote directly when you're writing the annotations for the annotated bibliography. I gave students kind of a sample just so that you can visualize what your final essay might look like. Here would be a plan as you're moving forward. Let's say that you chose to compare um, the lottery with the other story I've suggested as a companion, The Ones Who Walk Away from Omelas, which is really one of my favorite short stories ever. But I would begin with a little introduction, that little working introduction that let my reader know I'm comparing these stories. I would need to write a short summary of each story that focuses on the plot, the conflict. This would be a paragraph or two. You wouldn't want to get bogged down just completely retelling the story. But I might say, for example, in the lottery, that the village seems normal. The townspeople gather for a ceremony. Every household is acknowledged. Every household seems to be drawing for some sort of a prize. A woman who arrived late begins to complain when her family is selected, and then the readers find out that each family member has to draw, and then the reader doesn't find out until the very end of the story that the one person from the village who is selected is going to be killed by the villagers. And so the story takes a very dark turn at the end. That probably would take me, a paragraph or two to explain all that. Then I would need to summarize the plot of The Ones Who Walk Away from Omelas. Again, focusing on the conflict. The village of Omelas is a beautiful village. It's very colorful. Everyone there is so joyous. It seems to be a festival every day. But, and I don't want to spoil this for those of you who want to read this short story, um, that village has a dark, dirty little secret way down in a basement somewhere. And so I would have to explain what horrible scene is in that basement and explain to the reader that the people who live in Omelas are required to go down and look at that horrific scene, and that's how they can appreciate their own happiness, by looking at this very desperate scene down in this basement. And some of the people in Omelas are so shaken by it that they walk away. Some people continue to live in the village and think, oh, life is so great because we really appreciate what a horrible life would be. Other people say, no, I don't want any of that, and they turn and walk away. And so then you would start to identify maybe similarities, maybe differences between the two stories. They're both set in a village. They're both examples of dystopian literature. Utopia is a perfect society. Dystopia is a very imperfect society. So I might want to talk a little bit about the setting. They both have to do with these small villages. I might have some information about the darkness of both stories. The lottery is about the savagery of man and the man's ability to follow traditions without really understanding what they mean. And I'm not going to go too far into The Ones Who Walk Away from Omelas, but they're in some ways doing the same thing, in some ways doing very different things. So I would have to highlight those differences. But then once I got past that part in my essay where I've summarized the two stories, talked about similarities and or differences, then I would move to the research that you did. And if you have 3 articles that you've summarized, you would begin a literature discussion where you would talk about what these sources are saying. You need to learn to refer to your sources by the author's last name. If the author is Peter Cook, then you would refer to that source as Cook. Cook argues that blah, blah, blah. And so maybe I would do that in a linear fashion where I would have my source, my article summary, article summary, article summary. Or maybe I would see that some of those critics are talking about the same thing, and some of those critics are arguing with one another, or some of the critics are talking about different things entirely. And one aspect of research, whether it's scientific research or research in the humanities, is we tend to begin research with a hunch that we know what information we want to find. And when we find it, hey, that's great. We made a great prediction. Our hypothesis proved true. But if we don't find what we want to find, that's okay too. As a matter of fact, it's to be expected. And so if you want to, find if you want to talk about the Cask of Amontillado and you want to argue that Montresor didn't get off scot-free, but if all of the critics are saying he did, well, then you state that, but you would give your reasons for arguing that, maybe this guy's on his deathbed. Don't use the word guy, it's too informal. Maybe this man is on his deathbed and he's realizing that his immortal soul is another type of torture if he's feeling guilty about this man that he's murdered. So to hope to find an idea in your research and then not to be able to find it, but you can identify this idea that you've been looking for, that's called finding a gap in the knowledge, finding a gap. And it offers a justification for future research. So it's fine to have an idea of what opinions you want the experts to have, but then if they don't have it, or no one has even researched it, then you can identify this need for future research. And it doesn't even mean that you have to do the research. It just means that the need for the research is there. And so that's one way to end a research paper, is a need for future research. Another way in the humanities, which is where we are, to end a research paper is to talk about human nature. And we've talked about the idea of the human condition in this class before. So that may give you a kind of an idea of why you're doing these annotated bibliography entries, and it also may give you an idea of how your finished paper might turn out. So we talked about that quite a bit today. We talked some about these Zoom sessions today that, again, you don't have to come every time, but it could even be that we use these Zoom sessions as kind of like office hours, where you can just pop in and ask an individual question. If you need resources, you can pop in and talk to me for a few minutes. That would be fine. We'll just use these meetings however we need to get through this very unusual semester. So some people wanted to know about due dates, and I have posted due dates because we do have a timeline. The college does not want to extend the semester, so we do need to be finished by early May. But for example, if you need an extra day or so on this first annotated bibliography entry or any of the other assignments, just stay in touch with me. Keep in touch with me. I can certainly be flexible because, again, when we started school back in January, we had no idea that we'd be spending half of the semester online. So I've made this little YouTube video because I didn't click the magic button to record the Zoom meeting today, so I'm going to post this one in lieu of today's Zoom meeting for those of you who told me you would like to attend, but you couldn't. And if you have any other questions, shoot me a message over Canvas. So, see you real soon.